Bullies target the black billionaire's daughter. What she did on stage left. Everyone speechless. The microphone trembled slightly in Kennedy Pierce's hand as she stepped into the blinding spotlight. The auditorium was packed. Parents, students, teachers, every seat filled. Her heart thudded so hard she thought the sound system might pick it up. But she kept walking, head high, eyes forward, sequined performance dress glittering under the stage lights. A low laugh rippled through the front rows. Kennedy didn't need to look. She knew the sound. The same trio of girls from her advanced arts class, Chloe, Megan, and Taylor, had followed her every step since sophomore year. Their favorite hobby? Reminding her in whispers and giggles that she didn't belong. "Careful, Kennedy," Chloe had hissed behind her earlier. "Wouldn't want the stage to collapse under all that entitlement." Another chuckle. Do billionaire daughters even know what it's like to work for something? Kennedy had smiled then. Just like now, but it was the kind of smile you wore like armor, not joy. She paused at center stage. The crowd quieted. Then a piercing sound cut through the hush. The big screen above the stage flickered, and to everyone's horror, a grainy video began to play. It was Kennedy, alone, in the locker room, singing, vulnerable, raw. The sound quality was poor, but her voice, full of power and soul, filled the auditorium. Then came the laughter, not from the crowd, but from the video itself. Chloe's voice, Megan's, Taylor's. Who does she think she is? Beyoncé? Please, she sounds like she's choking. You should post it. Instant fame. Gasps echoed around the room as people realized what was happening. Kennedy's private moment had been stolen, weaponized, and broadcast to humiliate her in front of the entire school. Ms. Alvarez, the arts director, scrambled toward the control booth. "Shut it off," she snapped. But the damage was already done. Kennedy stood frozen. Then she exhaled. She took a single step forward, still holding the mic. Her voice, steady, clear, and deliberate, cut through the tension. "Well, since everyone's already heard me sing in secret, I guess I might as well do it live." A stunned silence, and then she began. No music, no backing track, just her voice. But this time it wasn't raw. It was refined, trained, rich with emotion. The entire room held its breath as Kennedy transformed humiliation into a performance that crackled with electricity. Her voice soared, dipping into jazz riffs and soul tones that wrapped around the stunned audience. Somewhere near the back, a father stood. Terrence Pierce, black tech billionaire, founder of Horizon AI. He had slipped into the room just as the video had started and now stood motionless, jaw clenched, as his daughter reclaimed her stage. After the final note, silence. Then, an eruption of applause. Even some teachers stood. Others sat stunned. Kennedy didn't bow. She simply handed the mic to Ms. Alvarez and walked off stage, chin high. In the green room, she finally allowed her hands to tremble. Her best friend, Maya, rushed in. "Are you okay?" "Kennedy, what they did, I'm fine," Kennedy said quietly. "But they're not going to be." Across campus, Chloe, Megan, and Taylor huddled together in the hallway, whispering frantically. They hadn't expected the video to go viral, or the backlash. Students were already reposting Kennedy's live vocals, comparing them to the cruel leaked version. And then came the school principal. Principal Daniel's voice was tight with anger. "My office, now." What none of them knew was that Kennedy had been documenting the bullying for months. She hadn't said anything, not because she was afraid, but because she was collecting evidence. Every insult, every stolen glance, every locker prank. Terrence had advised her to handle it with grace, but he'd also told her, "You don't have to stay silent, baby. You get to decide when it's time." Kennedy had decided. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. That evening, the school's board received a private email, a comprehensive report of systematic harassment, names, dates, screenshots, from Kennedy Pierce, daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country, but also a student who had been patient for too long. The next day, 3 students were suspended. Ms. Alvarez formally apologized on behalf of the program, and Principal Daniels scheduled an open assembly to address the toxic culture inside the Academy's arts program. But it wasn't over, because Kennedy wasn't done. Her story had gone viral not because she was a billionaire's daughter, but because she had stood on stage, humiliated, and turned it into triumph. And now she had been invited to sing at a televised youth summit on social justice in the arts. What she had to say was only just beginning. And the bullies? They were watching the world rally around the girl they tried to tear down, and realizing they'd made her unstoppable. The next morning, Kennedy walked through the halls of Southcrest Academy with her head held high, but this time something was different. People stared, but not with mockery, with awe, with guilt, with something resembling respect. Some stepped aside to let her pass. Others whispered apologies they didn't have the courage to say out loud. Even a few teachers looked at her with new eyes, as if realizing they'd ignored the warning signs for too long. But Kennedy wasn't interested in applause. She was watching, calculating. She knew the real test wasn't over. One performance wouldn't fix everything, especially not at a school where privilege whispered behind closed doors and rules bent for the right last name. As she passed the administrative wing, she caught a glimpse of Chloe in the guidance counselor's office, eyes red, lips trembling, her father beside her in a sharp gray suit. Kennedy paused only for a second before walking on. She didn't smile. She wasn't here for vengeance. She was here for change. Later that afternoon, the arts department held a closed meeting. Ms. Alvarez, still shaken from the scandal, tried to regain control. "This program stands for excellence, inclusion, and respect," she said stiffly. "What happened was unacceptable. We are working closely with the school board to ensure nothing like this happens again." A few students nodded solemnly. Others glanced toward Kennedy. Chloe wasn't there. Neither was Megan. Taylor had transferred overnight. Her parents yanked her out and enrolled her in a private academy across the state. But what caught Kennedy's attention wasn't the apology. It was the silence that followed it. Because she knew something was off. When the meeting ended, she didn't go home. Instead, she made her way to the IT lab where her friend Cameron, a tech genius with more hoodie than social skills, was buried in code. "I need your help," Kennedy said. Cameron swiveled in his chair. "Let me guess. This isn't over?" Kennedy pulled a flash drive from her bag. "There's something wrong with the way that video got uploaded. It wasn't just a phone recording. It came from the school's internal network." Cameron raised an eyebrow. "You're saying someone inside helped leak it?" "I'm saying," she replied, "this wasn't just a high school prank. It was planned." Hours later, Cameron confirmed it. The security footage had been downloaded from the school's system, not a phone, not a student, but a staff login. Kennedy's heart sank. It wasn't just her classmates who had tried to humiliate her. An adult had helped them do it. That night, in her father's home office, Kennedy sat across from Terrence Pierce. He read the report Cameron had printed, his jaw tightening with every line. "Do you know who the login belongs to?" he asked. "Yes," Kennedy said. "Coach Layton." Terrence leaned back, stunned. "The music coach? The one who said he was so proud of you yesterday?" Kennedy nodded. "That's why it worked. No one would suspect him." Terrence was silent for a moment. Then, "You want me to handle this?" Kennedy shook her head. "Number I want to go through the proper channels. I want to expose it the right way." He smiled faintly. "Just like your mom?" Kennedy's mother, Gabrielle, had been a civil rights attorney before her passing. She believed in systems, in justice over retribution. Kennedy had grown up watching her fight for people who had no voice. Now Kennedy would do the same. The next day, Kennedy requested a meeting with the school board. Not as the daughter of Terrence Pierce, as a student, a witness, a target. She walked into the boardroom alone, sat across from 7 adults in suits, and told them everything. The bullying, the video, the breach, the betrayal. At first, some looked uncomfortable, others skeptical, until she handed them Cameron's report. Silence, then murmurs. By the end of the meeting, the board had agreed to launch an internal investigation. Kennedy left the room with her head high again, but this time, not because she'd proven anything, because she'd started something. But outside, as she reached for her phone, a shadow stepped from the corner. It was Coach Layton. "You think you're making a difference," he said softly. "But this school isn't going to change for you. You're not special, Kennedy." She stared at him, unflinching. "You're right, I'm not special. I'm just not scared of you." He scoffed. "You really think the board will take the word of some rich kid over mine?" Kennedy didn't blink. They won't need to. The evidence already did. She turned and walked away, her heart pounding, not from fear, from the thrill of standing her ground. That night, the board suspended Coach Layton pending investigation. His access to school systems was revoked. The news spread like wildfire. But Kennedy knew this wasn't victory. Not yet. Because if a teacher could betray her so easily, how many others were complicit in silence? She was beginning to see that her fight wasn't just against bullies. It was against a system built to protect them. And she wasn't done tearing it down. The fallout from Coach Layton's suspension rippled through South Crest Academy like a shockwave. Some students acted like nothing had happened. Others were visibly shaken, especially those who had once laughed behind Kennedy's back. A few even tried to talk to her in the hallways, timid hellos, half-hearted compliments. But she ignored them, not out of pride, but clarity. She knew which voices were silent when it mattered. At lunch, Kennedy sat alone near the window, phone buzzing with media alerts. Her story had leaked, not by her doing, but from a parent on the school board who'd tipped off a local reporter. The headline read, "Billionaire's daughter exposes bullying, corruption at elite academy." She hated the word billionaire in that context. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. Cameron slid into the seat across from her with a laptop. "You're trending again," he said, flipping the screen to show Twitter feeds full of outrage, admiration, and skepticism. Kennedy frowned. "What's that one?" Cameron zoomed in. A burner account posting anonymous screenshots, heavily edited, to make Kennedy look like she staged the bullying for attention. The handle was at truthovertitles. "They're calling you a plant," Cameron said quietly, "saying your dad paid off the board to frame Coach Layton, that you faked the tears for the spotlight." Kennedy felt the familiar chill of injustice crawl up her spine. She clenched her jaw. "They're trying to rewrite the story before it's finished." And just like that, she knew this wasn't just about Southcrest anymore. That evening at home, she sat with her father in the kitchen. Terrence was slicing lemons into his water like always, meticulous and calm, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "I've seen this before," he said. "When people don't like the truth, they smear the source." Kennedy looked at him. "What do I do?" "You stay loud, stay smart, and you don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with facts." Her phone buzzed, another alert. She glanced at the screen and froze. A new post from @truthovertitles. This time it had a picture. Her, backstage, from rehearsal week, alone, hair tied back, reading a script. The caption read, Funny how the victim always has perfect lighting for her breakdowns, almost like she's acting. Kennedy's fingers trembled. This photo was taken in a staff-only area. How would anyone outside faculty have access to this? Terrence leaned in. That's not just an anonymous troll. That's someone with access, someone inside. The realization crashed down like thunder. The person trying to discredit her wasn't some bored outsider. It was someone within the school, possibly faculty, possibly another student with connections. She needed help. Real help. The next day, Kennedy met with Principal Gates, a man who had been neutral for too long. She laid everything on his desk: Cameron's data, the screenshots, the metadata proving the leaks were coming from school IPs. Gates looked tired, defeated even. "This is a lot, Kennedy," he sighed. "No," she corrected him. "This is exactly what happens when no one pays attention." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll authorize a digital audit." Quietly. But Kennedy wasn't done. That afternoon she spoke with Ms. Alvarez again, this time not as a teacher but as a witness. "I need the list," Kennedy said, "of everyone with backstage access last week: staff, volunteers, upper-class mentors." Ms. Alvarez hesitated. "That's confidential, Kennedy." "It's connected to the leaks," Alvarez blinked, then slowly reached into her file drawer and slid a printed roster across the table. Kennedy scanned it. One name jumped out. Megan Hawthorne, Chloe's best friend, the one who cried crocodile tears when everything fell apart, the one who swore she didn't know it would go that far. But Megan had volunteered to help backstage the week of the performance, and Megan's older brother was in IT for the school district. Kennedy stared at the name, heart pounding. She had her suspect. That night she texted Megan, asked to meet. Neutral ground, a small cafe near campus. Megan arrived with her designer bag and carefully rehearsed concern. "I didn't expect to hear from you," she said, feigning innocence. "I wanted to ask you something," Kennedy said, watching her closely. "Were you in the tech booth at any point during rehearsals?" Megan blinked. "No, maybe once? To drop off a water bottle for Coach Layton." "Why?" "Because someone's been leaking photos, and metadata traces them to a school account, one that accessed the tech booth cameras." Megan's fingers tightened around her iced latte. "Why are you asking me?" "Because your brother works in the district, because you had access, and because someone is trying really hard to make me look like a liar." Megan's voice dropped. "You think I'd risk everything to—" "What? Ruin your name?" Kennedy leaned in. "I think you didn't like that your little clique got exposed, and you wanted to take the spotlight back." Megan stood up abruptly. "You have no proof." But Kennedy didn't flinch. "Not yet." Megan stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Later that night, Cameron forwarded her an alert. A new file had just been deleted remotely from a school server. The username? Registered under Megan's student ID. He managed to recover a fragment before it was wiped completely. It was a video. Raw, unedited. Footage of Chloe rehearsing lines in the tech booth, mocking Kennedy behind her back. The same angle the @TruthOverTitles page used. Kennedy had her proof, but she didn't post it. Not yet. Because the game had changed. They were trying to drag her into the mud. She was going to drag the whole system into the light. It started with a whisper in the auditorium hallway. Kennedy was sitting outside the rehearsal room, scrolling through the recovered footage again. The weight of it hadn't eased. It was proof, yes. But she didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. She wanted change. But no one had stepped forward. Not Chloe, not Megan, and certainly not the administration, who now seemed more focused on damage control than justice. Inside the auditorium, Ms. Alvarez was calling roll for the cast. The spring talent showcase was only 2 weeks away. A tradition at South Crest, It was where students displayed original performances, music, spoken word, dance. This year, Kennedy was set to perform a monologue. She'd chosen a piece by Lorraine Hansberry, but as she sat on the hard bench, an idea started to form, something sharper, riskier, personal. Cameron jogged up, out of breath, holding his phone. "You need to see this," he said, voice low. She looked down. A new post from @TruthOverTitles. This one wasn't just a photo, it was audio. Kennedy's voice. The clip had her saying, "It's easy to manipulate people when they're too stupid to question anything." Kennedy's face went pale. She had never said those words. Not like that. The cadence was hers, but the context was wrong, twisted, clipped together. It was a deep fake. "Where did this come from?" she whispered. "Same account," Cameron said. "But this one's spreading. Fast, Reddit, TikTok, Discord forums. Even a few parents are sharing it." Kennedy felt bile rise in her throat. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was warfare. That night, Terrence found her on the patio, curled in a blanket, staring out at the city skyline. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "Did someone fabricate your voice?" "Yes. They're trying to make me look like the villain. Flip the narrative. Make it seem like I've been manipulating the school the whole time." "And you have proof?" "I have everything, but I don't know if anyone will believe it. People believe what they want, and right now, they want me to be the enemy." Terrence sat beside her, calm but fierce. "I built my first company on one principle. Don't let people tell your story for you. You want the truth out? Then you tell it. Unapologetically. Loudly." Kennedy looked at him. "What if I don't want to be seen as the billionaire's daughter? What if I just want to be me?" He smiled sadly. "Then show them who that is. Not with a press conference, not with lawyers, but on that stage. Say what they're too scared to admit." For the next 3 days, Kennedy rewrote her entire monologue. No more Hansberry. This would be hers. She titled it, "The Invisible Spotlight." It wasn't about being a victim. It was about being watched, judged, twisted by expectations she never asked for. She wrote about the silence in classrooms, the microaggressions in bathrooms, the teachers who smiled at her but only when parents were watching. She wrote about power, how real power isn't inherited, it's chosen. It's earned in the quiet when no one is looking. Only Cameron and Ms. Alvarez saw the script before the showcase. Both were stunned. "You're going to shatter them," Alvarez whispered. "I'm not trying to destroy," Kennedy replied. "I'm trying to rebuild." But word had already spread. Chloe and Megan were back in whispers, talking to friends, crafting fake concern. "You know she's planning something dramatic, right?" Chloe said loudly in the library. Typical attention grab. "She's probably going to cry on stage again," Megan added with a smirk. "Cue the applause." Kennedy walked past them silently, but she noted every word. The showcase arrived. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, alumni. Kennedy sat backstage, waiting for her name to be called. The curtains shifted slightly. Someone stepped behind her. It was Megan. "I just want to say," Megan whispered, "if you go out there and slander anyone, you'll regret it. People don't forget lies, Kennedy. Neither do donors." Kennedy turned, face composed. "I'm not scared of you, Megan. I never was. But I do hope when this is over, you realize how much of yourself you lost trying to keep your crown." Megan blinked, caught off guard. But before she could reply, Kennedy's name echoed through the speakers. She stepped onto the stage. A single spotlight illuminated her. The microphone buzzed. She took a breath and began. Her voice was steady. The room was silent. She didn't hold back. She described walking into classrooms where teachers assumed she was on scholarship. She recalled jokes whispered about black excellence, meaning money with a sad backstory. She spoke of Chloe and Megan, not by name but by action, the way some girls weaponized kindness, the way they smiled to your face and gutted you behind closed doors. She paused. I used to think being silent made me stronger, that rising above meant pretending I didn't hear the hate. But silence isn't strength. It's survival, and I'm done surviving. There was a beat of silence, then applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Kennedy stood motionless. Across the crowd, she spotted Chloe's face, frozen, jaw tight. Megan's too. But it wasn't just the students reacting. Principal Gates was on his feet. So was Ms. Alvarez. Even Terrence, seated quietly near the back, wiped a tear. And then came the twist. From stage left, a staff member jogged onto the floor, whispering something urgently into Gates's ear. Gates paled, then spoke into the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have just been informed of a significant development involving digital misconduct on school servers. The auditorium buzzed. Kennedy's breath caught, and she knew. The truth had finally caught up with the lies, but the firestorm had only begun. The principal's announcement dropped into the auditorium like a bomb. The crowd stirred, murmurs swelling into confusion. Kennedy stood frozen under the spotlight, her chest rising and falling as her heart pounded. She hadn't expected this, not yet. The timing felt surreal. Principal Gates cleared his throat and continued. There has been a credible breach of our school's digital infrastructure. Anonymous footage and digitally altered content have been traced back to student devices. An internal investigation is underway, and legal authorities have been contacted. The words hung in the air. Faces turned toward each other, students whispering, parents pulling out their phones. Chloe's posture stiffened in her seat. Megan's face lost all color. Kennedy stepped off stage slowly, almost dazed, as the room erupted into a flurry of reactions. Ms. Alvarez intercepted her backstage. You were phenomenal, she said, gripping Kennedy's arms. Whatever happens next, that performance mattered. You shook them. Kennedy tried to speak, but her voice was caught somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. Later that night, as rain tapped softly against her bedroom window, Kennedy sat in silence while Terrence stood across from her with folded arms. He had just gotten off a call with a private investigator he'd discreetly hired weeks earlier, someone who had confirmed what no school administrator had dared to admit. It was Chloe, Terrence said flatly. Her father's company built the cloud servers for Southcrest. She had access. Administrative-level access. Kennedy blinked. You're saying she didn't just post the fake clip, she created it? With help, someone at her dad's office, and Megan distributed it. They thought they were being clever, encrypting file names, bouncing IPs, but not clever enough. Kennedy felt rage knot in her stomach, not just for herself, but for every student who had ever been targeted and silenced. I'm not going to let them get away with this, she said. Terrence leaned forward. And you won't. But listen to me, Kennedy. You need to do this your way, not mine. Not through lawyers. Through truth. Through integrity. Whatever you decide next, make sure it's something you can live with. The next morning, Kennedy arrived at school wearing black slacks and a simple gray blouse. Her hair was pulled back tight and there were no accessories, no makeup, no armor, just her. When she entered the main hallway, the students parted like a tide. Whispers followed her, some curious, some admiring, others resentful. Chloe and Megan stood near their lockers, pretending to talk about something trivial, but their eyes tracked Kennedy like prey. She passed them without a glance. By second period, the news had fully broken. Southcrest's internal investigation report had leaked online. It contained damning evidence, screenshots of metadata, server logs, even internal messages between Chloe and Megan planning the sabotage. Chloe was suspended indefinitely, Megan expelled. But the fallout didn't stop there. Local media outlets got wind of the scandal. The story was framed as a cautionary tale about cyberbullying, race, and privilege in elite private schools. Suddenly, Kennedy's name was trending, not just as a victim, but as a young woman who had stood firm in the face of a sophisticated takedown campaign. Chloe was suspended indefinitely, Megan expelled. But the fallout didn't stop there. Local media outlets got wind of the scandal. The story was framed as a cautionary tale about cyberbullying, race, and privilege in elite private schools. Suddenly, Kennedy's name was trending, not just as a victim, but as a young woman who had stood firm in the face of a sophisticated takedown campaign. That afternoon, Kennedy was summoned to a special student assembly. She had barely stepped into the auditorium when the entire student body erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind. Thunderous. Lasting. She was ushered on stage alongside Principal Gates and the school board chair, an older woman named Helen Kingsley, who looked both somber and proud. Helen spoke first. Today we acknowledge what should have never been in question, that every student deserves safety, respect, and justice, no matter their background, no matter their last name. She turned to Kennedy. You reminded us what strength looks like. Kennedy stepped forward. She hadn't planned to speak, but the moment demanded it. I don't want to be remembered for what happened to me, she said into the microphone. I want to be remembered for what I did with it, for using my voice when silence was easier, and for refusing to let anyone else write my story. The crowd rose to its feet. From the corner of the room, Kennedy spotted Ms. Alvarez wiping a tear. Backstage, as students milled about, someone approached her. It was Emily, a freshman girl who Kennedy had seen being teased earlier that year. She spoke softly. Thank you for not staying quiet. You gave the rest of us permission not to either. Kennedy smiled, finally understanding what her father meant. Power wasn't money. It wasn't legacy. It was using what you had to pull others up with you. That evening, back at home, she curled up on the couch beside Terence. For the first time in weeks, she felt light. You know what's funny? She said, looking at him. What? I thought the scariest part would be the truth coming out. But it wasn't. Terence raised an eyebrow. It was realizing I had the strength to face it. He smiled. You didn't just face it, Kennedy. You changed the game. But neither of them saw the email waiting in her inbox. An invitation from a national speaking summit. Topic: the power of youth in digital justice. And Kennedy Rhodes was the keynote speaker. The next day, Kennedy Rhodes walked through the front doors of Southcrest Academy with a different kind of weight pressing on her shoulders. But it wasn't shame. It was purpose. Her name had already spread beyond the school walls, beyond even Atlanta. Her performance, the sabotage, the footage, everything had gone viral. Yet it wasn't the kind of viral that made people laugh and scroll. It was the kind that made them stop, pause, feel. That morning, a local news van was parked discreetly across from the school gates. Reporters weren't allowed on campus, but everyone knew why they were there. Students whispered behind hands and phone screens. Even faculty looked at Kennedy as if they weren't sure whether to applaud her or ask for an autograph. But none of that mattered now, because something bigger was about to unfold. It started in third period when Principal Gates stepped into Kennedy's AP government class unannounced. Miss Rhodes, he said evenly, can I speak with you for a moment? Every head turned. Kennedy nodded calmly and stood, gathering her notebook as if it were just another Tuesday. He led her to his office in silence. Once inside, she saw two men in dark suits sitting stiffly in the leather chairs across from Gates's desk. They rose when she entered. "Miss Rhodes," one said, extending a hand. "I'm Agent Marcus Delaney with the Department of Justice. This is Special Investigator Rowan." He gestured to the other man. Kennedy blinked, stunned. "Am I in trouble?" Delaney shook his head. "Not at all. In fact, we're here because of what you exposed. We've been monitoring a string of student-targeted cyber attacks across several elite private schools nationwide. Yours is the first with evidence strong enough to pursue." Kennedy sat down slowly. "You're saying this wasn't just Chloe and Megan? It started here. But the tools they used? The software? That came from higher up. This wasn't just petty bullying. This was orchestrated digital warfare, likely with involvement from their parents' tech firm." Gates looked rattled. "We had no idea it was that deep," Delaney continued. "The sabotage wasn't just about Kennedy. It was about maintaining an illusion, power, exclusivity, intimidation. What Kennedy did, standing up in front of that stage, refusing to stay quiet, she disrupted something much larger than Southcrest." Kennedy swallowed hard. "So, what happens now?" Rowan smiled gently. "Now we investigate, but we'd like your help. Your story can bring forward others who've been silenced. If you're willing, we'd like you to speak at a student-led symposium we're organizing next month." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it, not because I'm brave, but because I'm tired of being scared." Later that day, Chloe was escorted off campus by security, not in handcuffs, but close enough. Her mother had stormed into the school demanding answers, only to be met with a letter from the school board announcing Chloe's permanent removal and full cooperation with federal investigators. Megan, who had already been suspended, posted a tearful apology video from her living room couch. It was clear someone had scripted it. "I didn't mean for things to go that far," she said between sniffles. I didn't think it would blow up. I was stupid. I was wrong." But the comments were merciless, because everyone saw through it. And Kennedy? She didn't respond. Not online, not in interviews, not to the flood of messages pouring into her inbox. Instead, she sat with her father on their back patio, watching the sunset through the tall oaks. "I don't know how I feel about all this," she admitted. "Some of it feels good, but some of it just feels heavy." Terrence handed her a mug of tea. "That's how you know it's real. If it didn't weigh anything, it wouldn't matter." Kennedy looked over at him. "Do you think I handled it right?" "I think you handled it the only way you could, with honesty, with heart, with fire." She nodded quietly, the wind brushing her curls against her cheeks. The next morning, when she walked into the school cafeteria, something unexpected happened. One by one, students stood. No one said a word at first. They just stood. Then it spread, like a wave. Quiet, powerful. Ms. Alvarez stepped in from the back and began clapping. Others joined in. Kennedy stood still in the doorway, overwhelmed. Her fingers trembled slightly at her sides. Then someone stepped out from a table near the front. It was Emily, the same freshman who had spoken to her backstage. She held up her phone. On it was a message board post from another student, this time from a school in Chicago, saying, "I watched Kennedy's video. Today I reported my bully. First time I've ever said anything." And beneath it, a flood of comments. "Same? Me too. Thank you, Kennedy." She didn't cry, but her voice broke slightly when she finally said, "Thank you." For the first time in weeks, Kennedy ate lunch in peace, not because the noise had disappeared, but because she wasn't eating alone anymore. Kennedy sat quietly backstage in the velvet-draped green room of a downtown Atlanta auditorium, the hum of the packed audience beyond the curtain like distant thunder. She should have been nervous, but she wasn't. Not after everything. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something they tried to strip from her, her voice. Weeks had passed since the chaos at Southcrest. The federal investigation had rocked not just the school, but the entire district. Headlines read like scripts from a scandal drama. Private school, cyberbullying scandal, exposes wealthy cover-up, and teen exposes elite network of digital harassment. But this was different. The Department of Justice had invited Kennedy to be the keynote speaker at the Youth Resilience Conference, an event designed to spotlight student voices that had challenged toxic systems. She wasn't here because she was a billionaire's daughter. She was here because she spoke when others stayed silent. From the wings, her father watched proudly. Terrence Rhodes had faced hostile boardrooms and corporate power grabs, but nothing moved him like watching his daughter walk forward with grace under fire. "Miss Rhodes," a coordinator whispered, "you're up in 2. Kennedy nodded. She turned to her dad. "Whatever happens out there, thank you for not stepping in." He raised a brow. "You didn't need me to. You've got your mother's fire." A stagehand signaled. Kennedy stepped into the spotlight. The crowd was bigger than she'd imagined. Hundreds of students, educators, parents, even policymakers. And in the front row, notepads in hand, were 2 national news anchors. She walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and let the silence sit for a beat. "My name is Kennedy Rhodes," she began, her voice strong. "And a few months ago I thought silence was safer." There wasn't a breath out of place in the audience. I let people laugh when I didn't understand the joke. I let them talk over me, talk about me, rewrite who I was without ever asking me. I stayed quiet because I thought I had to earn the right to be seen. She paused. But the moment I stepped on that stage during the Southcrest Winter Showcase, I realized something. Silence doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you small. Murmurs rippled through the audience. You know what hurt the most? It wasn't the sabotage, it wasn't the rumors. It was looking around and realizing no one had my back, not even teachers, not even the adults who were supposed to protect us. That's what broke me. A hand went up in the audience. Kennedy paused, then nodded. A young boy with thick glasses stood. "What changed?" Kennedy looked directly at him. "I did." Applause broke out, genuine and loud. "But I didn't do it alone," she added quickly. "I had people who reminded me that my voice matters. My dad, Ms. Alvarez, even strangers online who saw the footage and said, 'This isn't right.' And that's what we're all here for, isn't it? To say enough is enough." After the speech, the auditorium burst into a standing ovation. Kennedy stepped off stage, blinking back tears. Not from sadness, but from release. But the biggest surprise came just minutes later, when a woman in her early 50s with sleek, silver-streaked hair approached her backstage. "I'm Natalie Preston," the woman said, holding out a business card. "Executive producer at National Spotlight Media. I want to interview you, not just about what happened, but about what you plan to do next. Young women need to hear this. Black girls especially." Kennedy hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for all that." Natalie smiled. "You already are. You're not just a survivor. You're a signal flare, and the world's watching now." That night, Kennedy sat in the back of a black town car next to her father, the city lights dancing across the windows. "You okay?" Terrence asked. She leaned her head against the seat. "I think I am," he smiled. "Then let's get ready, because this was just the opening act." But neither of them expected what came next. Just before midnight, Kennedy's phone buzzed. An email from Southcrest Academy. Subject: formal apology and invitation to return. She read it twice before handing the phone to her dad. "Do I go back?" she asked softly. Terrence didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Only if you're walking in on your terms." Kennedy turned to look out the window. "I won't walk in alone," she said. "Next time I'm bringing everyone who never got a seat at the table." And just like that, she knew. This fight was bigger than her. It was just beginning. Kennedy stepped back onto South Crest grounds on a gray Monday morning, flanked by her father and a quiet yet determined entourage. Miss Alvarez, her former music teacher reinstated after being cleared of all wrongdoing, and two new diversity equity officers assigned to the school following the investigation. The entire student body stood in a hushed line outside the main hall. They hadn't been told what was happening, only that there would be an important announcement. Principal Whitaker stood stiffly at the podium. His usual smug demeanor had been replaced with something brittle, like a man who finally realized his power wasn't absolute. He cleared his throat. "Today," he began, eyes scanning the crowd, "we welcome back a student who taught us all a lesson about integrity, courage, and the importance of accountability." Kennedy didn't wait for him to finish. She walked up beside him and gently took the mic. "Thanks, Principal Whitaker, but I'll take it from here." There was a gasp, then silence. She turned to face the crowd. "I didn't come back to get revenge. I came back to rebuild something better. Because South Crest isn't just a school, it's a mirror. And for a long time, that mirror only reflected a certain type of success, a certain type of student, a certain type of story." She paused. Students were leaning forward now, drawn in. "But I'm not here to fit into that story. I'm here to rewrite it." In the middle of the crowd, Harper, the former queen bee and chief bully, looked down, ashamed. Her once loyal friends had already distanced themselves, and her father's resignation from the board had been a public humiliation. But Kennedy didn't even glance her way. This wasn't about Harper anymore. "This school let a culture of silence thrive," Kennedy continued. "It taught kids like me to smile through insults, to pretend microaggressions were jokes, to shrink ourselves so others could feel big. But not anymore." There was a slow clap from the back, then another, and suddenly the entire courtyard erupted into applause. Not the forced, polite kind, but real, full-hearted clapping. As it faded, Miss Alvarez stepped forward and handed Kennedy a sealed envelope. Kennedy opened it. Her eyes widened. "What is it?" her father asked, sensing the shift. "It's a full-ride scholarship," Kennedy whispered. "Berkeley. They saw the showcase performance footage and offered me early admission." Terrence's face cracked into a smile. "Looks like they saw what the world finally did." But there was still one more thing to do. Later that afternoon, Kennedy stood on the same stage where it all fell apart months ago. This time, it wasn't for an audience of classmates. It was for a national news segment being filmed live. The producers had asked for a brief performance, but Kennedy had something else in mind. She sat at the piano. No flashy spotlight, no background singers. Just her and a melody she wrote herself, a piece that blended soul, jazz, and the raw ache of survival. As she played, footage from her speech played behind her. Clips of her being mocked, footage of the showcase sabotage, scenes from the investigation, and finally, her triumph. The song swelled with hope, then dropped into silence. She finished. The camera panned in close, and Kennedy looked right into the lens. To every girl who's been told she's too loud, too dark, too much. To every student who's been shut out of rooms they deserve to be in. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for a seat. Build your own stage. Back at home, the Rhodes living room was full of flowers, messages, and calls from news networks, universities, and even nonprofits. But none of that compared to what Kennedy did next. She started a foundation, not in her name, but in her mother's. The Naomi Rhodes Initiative would fund music programs, scholarships, and anti-bullying campaigns in schools across Georgia. Terrence watched from the kitchen as his daughter worked late one night, building out the website. You've already done more at 17 than I did at 35, he said softly. Kennedy smiled. And I'm just getting started. The screen lit up with a new message. It was from a girl in Chicago. I watched your video. I'm not afraid to audition anymore. Thank you. Kennedy's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "You've got this. Go be loud. Go be you." She hit send, and with that, her story didn't end. It began.